Traore is a symbol, and a symbol is part of the system.
In this powerful episode of Lumumba Explained, Professor PLO Lumumba delivers a masterclass on the rise of Captain Ibrahim Traore, the young African leader of Burkina Faso country who has ignited a new wave of Pan-African hope and revolutionary spirit, from Thomas Sankar's legacy to Traore's bold defiance of France, the IMF, and corrupt African elite. Lumumba unpacks the meaning of revolution in the 21st century Africa. Are we witnessing the birth of a new African dawn, or just another cycle of military rule? Why are Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger uniting? And what role does Russia play in the new geopolitical chessboard? Africa is at a crossroad, and Traore is the symbol of resistance, defiance, and self-determination.
The current situation in Burkina Faso must be understood in the context of history.
This is the history of Burkina Faso from Thomas Sankara to Traore. Thomas Sankara, often celebrated as African Che Guevara, became president of Burkina Faso in 1983 following a military coup. His vision for Burkina Faso was rooted in Marxist principles and Pan-Africanism. The leadership style was characterized by radical reforms to achieve economic self-sufficiency, social equality, and national pride. Sankara's economic policies aimed to reduce foreign aid dependency and promote self-reliance, as he initiated large-scale agrarian reforms to boost food production and achieve food security. He urged Burkinabe to consume local products and minimize imports. Sankara was an advocate of social justice, focusing on gender equality and the right of marginalized individuals. He outlawed practices such as female genital mutilation and forced marriages. Women were encouraged to participate actively in all sectors of society, including the military. Sankara's government launched an ambitious public health campaigns, notably a massive vaccination drive that significantly reduced infant mortality. His emphasis on education led to improved literacy rate, with numerous schools built across the country. Recognizing the threat of desertification, Sankara initiated extensive reforestation projects. Millions of trees were planted, highlighting his commitment to environment sustainability. Sankara's leadership was marked by austerity and integrity. He led by example, rejecting the opulent lifestyle often associated with corrupt political leaders. His government was characterized by transparency and anti-corruption measures. Sankara's charismatic and revolutionary style inspired many, but created enemies among the elite and international power. The enemies managed to end Sankara's reign, as his popularity soared beyond expectations. His reign abruptly ended in 1987 when he was assassinated in a coup orchestrated by his close ally Blaise Compaoré. Despite his short time in power, he left a legacy symbolizing anti-imperialism and visionary leadership.
When Thomas Sankara took power in what was then Upper Volta, he changed the name of the country to Burkina Faso, the land of the upright men. That was seen as a revolution, and many things happened under the leadership of Thomas Sankara until he was eliminated in 1987. We now know that one of the people who participated was a close compatriot who became the president, Blaise Compaoré, and that is in the public domain. That short stint was so dramatic in the lives of the people of Burkina Faso and in Africa that Thomas Sankara became an icon. And the rise of Ibrahim Traore is almost seen as a reincarnation of Thomas Sankara and his revolutionary fervor. And that is why he has become a poster boy for the new Africa.
Now, Ibrahim Traoré, the modern military leader. Traoré, a more recent figure in the Burkina Faso's political landscape, assumed power in 2022 after a military coup. His leadership comes at a time of significant internal conflict, with the country facing severe security challenges due to jihadist insurgencies and socio-political instability. Traore's immediate focus has been on restoring security in Burkina Faso. His government has prioritized military campaigns against the jihadist group that have destabilized large parts of the country. He sought to strengthen the military and improve skills with the regional and international partners to combat terrorism. Traoré did not limit his campaign against jihadist group but emphasized good governance and combating corruption. He initiated reforms to enhance transparency and accountability within the government, following the footsteps of Sankara, and promised to complete what he started. Traoré administration is like compared to Sankara, focusing on rebuilding the trust between the government and the individual. He has implemented policies to promote economic recovery and social development as he sought to address unemployment and improve living conditions through various socio-economic initiatives. Traoré has continued to pursue a pragmatic foreign policy, collaborating with international partners to assist Burkina Faso's security and development needs. His approach has been more about practical alliances than ideological alignment. Leadership style. Traoré leadership style is pragmatic and military-oriented, reflecting his background. Unlike Sankara's charismatic and ideological approach, Traoré's tenure is characterized by a practical focus on immediate challenges, particularly security. He has won the hearts of many Africans globally with his practical approach to solve imminent challenges, which is one of the characteristics of a great leader. Traoré, a young military leader, has had his name on a gold plate of history as one of the leaders who could be trusted to grab the wheel of a nation.
The year 2022, in the month of January, the government of Roch Marc Christian Kabore was overthrown in January. And part of the accusation against the Kabore administration was that they had failed to eliminate the Islamic insurgency in the northern part of Burkina Faso. But Kabore did not stay in power for too long. In the month of September, the administration that had overthrown Kabore in January, that was the administration of Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba. That is the administration that overthrew Kabore. He himself was to be overthrown in the month of September, the year 2022, by Ibrahim Traore and his colleagues. And the reason why I think Traore then very quickly became the poster boy was because of the decisions that he made to sever ties with France. His language was that we had remained a neo-colonial state for too long. Re-echoing what Thomas Sankara had said, his language was that we must have our own resources. If it is our uranium, let us use our uranium. If it is feeding ourselves, let us engage in agriculture that is going to feed our people. Let us ensure that we, the Burkinabe, are doing things that are in the interest of the Burkinabe and therefore in the larger interest of the continent of Africa. And it also came at a time when there is general disillusionment with the ballot. Africans had been persuaded, particularly after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, that this thing called democracy as defined by the West was the alpha and omega of good governance. You had to have multi-party politics, you had to have periodic elections, and people went to the ballot. In many cases, the ballot was not very useful because the vote was stolen. And if it was not stolen, the people who emerged from the ballot did not do anything for the people. So the people wanted drama, the people wanted change, the people wanted sound rhetoric, the people wanted Pan-African rhetoric. And in many ways, Ibrahim Traore, as it stands now, represents that. But remember, his administration has only been in power for 3 years. In the life of a nation, that is a very short time. And one may say the beginning is good, but the journey is still long.
Now, why Africans are celebrating Traore and other juntas in Africa? First, he exposed the failures and stagnation of long-standing regimes. He reignited debates about sovereignty, Pan-Africanism, and self-reliance. Traore pressured the leaders to reconsider their alliance and governance models. He inspired youth and reformers to demand more from their governments. He has challenged the cultural and symbolic legacy of colonialism.
Why then are the people of Africa celebrating those who have acquired power in what other African leaders are calling unconstitutional change of power? Why is it that people who are described by the Western media and by African media as leading military juntas have become so unpopular? The reason is not far to seek. They have seen the so-called democratically elected leaders in different parts of Africa. They are corrupt. Some of them are murderous, and some of them are plain anti-people because they don't do that which is in the interest of the people. The people of Africa have seen how people who are in power retain and extend their stay in power for unnecessarily long when they are delivering nothing. And Ibrahim Traore's administration presents a hope, presents in the view of particularly young Africans a light at the end of the tunnel. And what is that light saying? That light is saying, and it can be heard through the echo chambers, saying, you the colonizers, you the French, who in 1958 pretended to hand over political power, we no longer want to be with you. We no longer want to be your latter-day slaves. Traore is being heard as saying that. Traore is being heard as saying, you the neo-colonizers who have given us the short hand of the stick, you reap where you have not sown. You take our uranium, you take our resources, you take our minerals, and you give us a pittance, you are not going to do it anymore. You, the colonizers who handed over to us systems of governance that cannot work, including electoral commissions, including printing ballots in your own countries, including printing paper currency in your own countries, we will not allow you. He is saying that. You, the colonizers who, when we want to liberate ourselves, you create insurgency, you sow seeds of discord within our ranks, we are not going to allow you to do that. You, the African Union, who ought to be protecting us as Africans, you ECOWAS, who ought to be protecting us as Africans, you too appear to be mere lapdogs of the international order, particularly the West. To the extent that he is saying that, he is striking the right chords of a dissatisfied, disillusioned people in the continent of Africa, and their wish and desire is that there is a new dawn.
Traoré as a symbol of renaissance. Traoré's impact extends beyond policy. He has skillfully used the symbolism to reclaim national dignity, such as banning colonial illegal attire in favor of traditional dress and expelling foreign media outlets seen as vehicle of external influence. These actions, while sometimes controversial, have struck a chord with Africans seeking to reclaim their cultural identity and assert their autonomy in the global arena. Other leaders, many of whom have adopted Western symbols and practices now, face questions about their authenticity and commitment to African values. Traoré's embrace on indigenous culture and reject of Western trappings have set a new standard for what it means to be an African leader in the 22nd century.
In the minds of many, Ibrahim Traore represents, and that is his appeal. Remember, throughout history, people, and this is human, always want symbols of what they are fighting about. In the struggle for independence, if you look at other nations, in Ghana it was Nkrumah, in Tanzania it was Nyerere, in Zambia it was Kaunda, in Malawi it was Banda, in Mozambique it was Machel, Angola it was Neto. But this is now big because Traore has come at a time when there is what I call African Renaissance, and people want things that are Pan-African to defy what happened in Berlin in 1884 and 1885. That is what is happening. He is that symbol. You know, in history, people emerge, or leadership emerges that is defined by environment. Upper Volta had been one of the French colonies that was seen to be wedded to the Paris government, almost in the class of La Côte d'Ivoire or Senegal at one time. When Thomas Sankara came and said, we've got to recognize ourselves, and started by changing the name of the country, that was unprecedented. It was only in Ghana that Nkrumah had changed the name of Gold Coast to Ghana. This was new, this was fresh. And Thomas Sankara then was seen in that mold. A servant leader who says, I do not want the trappings of power. I do not want long motorcades. I do not want security that is a mere display of power. I want to serve the people. I don't want to ride in Mercedes-Benz or Bentley or Cadillac. I want something that is functional, something that moves. And when Thomas Sankara appears in 1987 at the OAU meeting in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and calls for our refusal to pay debts.
Now, Traore versus Sankara. So many of you have been calling the show, commenting on what Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traore is doing in turning the country around. He has been compared to his late predecessor, Thomas Sankara, who was assassinated in 1987 after being in power for only 4 years. He managed to turn that country around by opening up education to all, including women, vaccinating millions of people, cutting government spending, planting 10 million trees, reducing cars used by cabinet ministers in all 4 years. Traore is praised for decolonizing Burkina Faso by enshrining national language and dropping French in schools and as an official language. Just like Sankara, Traore came into power via a military coup, changed so many things in a short space of time. There has been reports of assassination attempt on his life. So, to get to understand of who Ibrahim is and how he compares to Sankara, below is the video.
Traore is in that tradition. He was young then, but the stories must have been told to him of Thomas Sankara. And remember, they come out of the same environment, the military environment. They may have been trained after the style of the French, but sometimes you've got to swim in the oceans of the enemy in order to know who they are. So he grew in that environment, and when therefore he comes and says, we are leading, when he comes and says, we are not going to have the trappings of power to prevent us from working for the people, when he comes and says, my salary is not going to be increased, when he comes and says, I'm not going to be summoned to appear in European capitals, when he comes and says that the IMF and the World Bank are not going to dictate to us what to do, when he comes and says that the mineral companies of the West are not going to tell us what to do, we are going to choose our own friends in the international arena, he is speaking for many people in the continent of Africa. And that is why, for the moment, he remains in the minds and hearts of many people. And the prayer of many is that he does not change, because power has its own way of changing and corrupting people. The prayer of many who are watching him is that he remains on course, that he remains faithful to the agenda, that he remains faithful to his declared position that he is a people's servant, that he is a midwife to deliver for the people of Burkina Faso and to ensure that the quality of their lives is improved. For the moment, he is receiving the best judgment that a leader can expect. He can do no wrong in the minds of many. And the media and social media is populated with a lot of artificial intelligence things which are attributed to him, and they are all positive. That is a statement of the hunger that Africans have for positive messaging. It gives hope. It tells them that it can be done and that it must be done. So in the same way, for those who read the Bible, as Moses stood before his people and said, I'm going to part the Red Seas, Traore is expected to part Red Seas, almost to summon manna from heaven, almost to cause pillars of fire to stand between them and the neo-colonizers. The expectations are great.
Why Traore is an enemy of Emmanuel Macron and France? Traore's defiance is not just about Burkina Faso. It's about a broader geopolitical realignment in Africa, where sovereignty, resources, and ideology are being reclaimed from Western powers. For Macron, it is not only a democratic defeat, it's a warning of what may come elsewhere in France, former colonial sphere. Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso, is following in the footsteps of his revolutionary predecessor Thomas Sankara, who was assassinated in 1987 in a coup widely believed to have had the support of knowledge of foreign powers, including the French and possibly the CIA, in collusion with the Belgian interest. A desire to reduce Western influence, Burkina Faso has increasingly turned to Russia for military and strategic support. Today, Traoré stands as one of Africa's boldest voices against the neo-colonialism. His leadership aims to shift Burkina Faso and other continents towards a new era of sovereignty and development, breaking free from French-backed model of mineral exploitation that for decades allowed Paris to extract near-free resources while leaving Africans in poverty. Needless to say, such a stance threatens entrenched interests.
When Traoré came to power, and let us retrace the history again, that he came to power after Compaoré had been removed and had sought asylum outside of the country, I think in La Côte d'Ivoire. He came to power after Jean-Marc Christian Kabore's administration had been taken away. He came to power after Damiba had been taken away. And when he came and he appeared to be relieving and reviving what I call the Sankaraist philosophy, he became an immediate enemy of Paris, led by Macron. And Macron, you see, has carried himself almost as the latter-day Napoleon Bonaparte. To the extent that he has done so, anybody who is not towing the line, Macron, I think, sees himself, and this is subject to debate, not only as Napoleon Bonaparte, but also as Charles de Gaulle. And in that regard, he believes that the territories which were colonized by them must behave. Remember in 1958, after the yes-no vote, in which case only Sékou Touré of Guinea voted no, they used to refer to former French colonies as territoire de haute mer. These are our foreign territories in the distant land. So when you break loose, as Burkina did, says, what is happening here? Who do they think they are? Do they think they can withstand France? So it is personal anger. It is ego that has been hurt, and that can be dangerous. Hence, the reaction that you see from Paris. In other words, from the standpoint of Paris, Ibrahim Traore and his compatriots are giving a bad example to otherwise good boys and girls. When you look at Traore and Burkina Faso now, I think there are four categories of people when you look at how they are dealing with the Traore. There is category number one of leaders who are wedded to their colonizers, who think, oh, this young man, we've seen many like him, he's just a flash in the pan, he'll come and go. That is category number one. And I'm sure they tell their masters in the West, we have seen many, didn't we see Sankara? Didn't we see Lumumba? Didn't we see Nkrumah? Didn't we see Machel? Category number one. Category number two are those who are saying, I wish it was me who was getting this kind of adulation. What could I have done in order to ensure that my name is emblazoned on every other media? Those are actuated by ego and malice and envy and jealousy. That is another category of African leaders. The other category of African leaders are those who fear. They fear that what this young man and his compatriots are doing is setting a bad example, and I must now look very keenly at what my young men and women in the army are doing. They can't sleep.
Why coups are celebrated in Africa as juntas extend their reign in power. In some instances in Africa, coups are initially celebrated due to widespread dissatisfaction with existing governments, often perceived as corrupt, ineffective, or willing to relinquish power. When juntas then extend their rule, this initial support can erode as people realize that military rule may not deliver the promised improvement and can lead to further instability and human rights concerns. Reason for initial celebration: dissatisfaction with the current leadership. Many African nations have faced challenges with corruption, economic hardship, and lack of democratic accountability under the previous government. Second, perceived quick fix. Coups are sometimes seen as rapid solution to political crises, offering a seemingly immediate change in leadership. Initial promise. Leaders often make promises of reform, good governance, and economic development which can resonate with the public way of status quo. Now, reasons for eventual disillusionment: failure to deliver as promised. Military governments often struggle to deliver on their promises of improved governance and economic prosperity. Second, authoritarian tendencies. Juntas can be prone to authoritarianism, limiting political freedom and suppressing dissent, leading to a loss of initial support. Thirdly, human rights concerns. Coups can be accompanied by human rights abuses, including arbitrary arrest, detention, and restrictions on freedom of expression. Fourth, long-term instability. Entrenched military rule can create instability and undermine the development of democratic institutions. Rebranding as democratic. Some military regimes attempt to legitimize their rule through manipulated elections, which can further fuel public dissatisfaction.
In Africa, why is it becoming necessary? It is becoming necessary because those who are in office have perfected the art of sustaining themselves in power by manipulating the ballot. You know, there are 55 African countries, 54 recognized internationally. 40 of those countries print their ballots outside of the continent of Africa. And there is evidence in the cases of some of these countries that ballots are actually pre-marked in favor of certain candidates. So you can wake up all you want very early in the morning, but as was said by one leader many years ago, it is not those who vote that matter, but those who count the votes. So today, you walk across Africa and you hear young people saying, what is the purpose of voting anyway? The result is predetermined. And these individuals, once they get into power, what is their greatest claim to fame? They are thieves, they are liars, they are murderers. So people are becoming helpless. And it is in this context when an enlightened or a group of enlightened individuals in the armed forces then seize power through the barrel of the gun, then they get the people's support, because the people say, we don't like these individuals and therefore we are not going to listen to these individuals who say that power has been seized unconstitutionally. We are going to argue that the end justifies the means. And this is why therefore coups are becoming something that are celebrated. That is why there were people dancing in the streets of Niamey. That is why there were people dancing in the streets of Bamako. That's why there were people dancing in the streets of Libreville. That is why there were people dancing in the streets of Ouagadougou. And I'm sure there are many more in different African countries waiting to dance and asking themselves, when will an enlightened group of men and women emerge in our country to save us from the clutches of these megalomaniacs who have succeeded in manipulating the ballot? Burkina Faso has tried to achieve many things, but I also want us to contextualize Burkina Faso. The Burkina Faso economy is a small economy. Its GDP at very best is just slightly over 20 billion United States dollars. That is a small economy. But as the saying goes, you cut your coat according to your cloth. And what the administration of Traore has tried to do is, number one, to restore people's confidence and pride and esteem. That must never be forgotten. That people simply want to live free. They don't want to feel that they are enslaved or they are slaves of anybody. I think that has been done.
So let's look at how Traore is reviving Burkina Faso's economy. Today, Burkina Faso's young leader is pursuing an ambitious vision aimed at transforming the nation's economic landscape, fueled by reforms and a push for greater self-reliance. While challenges remain, his policies are showing signs of potential for significant growth. He has rejected financial assistance from the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, asserting Burkina Faso's capacity to develop independently. This stance has resonated with many Burkinabes and reflects a broader sentiment across Africa. A key component of Traore's economic strategy is a focus on nationalizing and controlling Burkina Faso's rich mineral resources. He has rationalized 2 gold mines and ended the export of unrefined gold, instead inaugurating a national gold refinery with a planned annual processing capacity of 150 tons. This move aims to increase the value added within the country and boost the domestic economy. Beyond the mining sector, Traore's administration has initiated other development projects, including the establishment of National Support Center for Artisanal Cotton Processing, the construction of a new airport, and increased investment in agriculture.
The administration of Traore has tried to do is, number one, to restore people's confidence and pride and esteem. That must never be forgotten. That people simply want to live free. They don't want to feel that they are enslaved or they are slaves of anybody. I think that has been done, giving meaning to the name of the country, the Burkina Faso, the land of the upright men. Number two, they have identified key areas that touch society, and therefore you see very deliberate focus on agriculture. Deliberate focus, not that they want to mechanize their agriculture in a dramatic way, but ensuring that household situation is proper, that people can have food and grow food that will feed themselves. That, I think, we see that there is quite some investment in agriculture, and attempts actually are being made to even mechanize agriculture to the extent that it is necessary, so that they do not rely on importation from food. That is also happening. The third thing is education, because people recognize that education is an important investment for younger people, and you can see that there's attempts, even in the face of very limited budgets, attempts to ensure that schools are equipped and schools are being managed in a manner that is responsive to the realities of the day, including technology and artificial intelligence. Another area that they have done very well is with a view to taking control of their natural resources. You will know that many of the resources, particularly in the mining sector, for which Burkina Faso is very famous, was under the control of many companies which were based either in Canada, the United States of America, Australia, and of course France. They are saying all the minerals and all these must now be mined for the benefit of the people of Burkina Faso. And they are not saying we are not going to trade with the world. No. They are simply saying there must be trade that ensures that the income that is generated and or realized from the exploitation of our minerals is used for the benefit of the people of Burkina Faso. They have also entered into what I call very useful engagements, and I think there are ongoing negotiations, particularly with the Russian government, with a view to having energy. And I think that in itself is useful in terms of transferring technology, so that some of the seeds or rather the fruits of the seed that are being sown today will only germinate after a short while. And the other thing that I think they are trying to do is to ensure that they, as much as is possible, control their affairs. The decision to have a passport that is printed and covers the 3 Sahelian countries of Burkina, of Mali, and of course Niger is a good thing. Having a currency that is not pegged on France, CFA franc, I think it is a good thing. Having a military that is focused on the people's plight is important. In eliminating institutions which are simply parasitic upon the population is also a good thing.
So what are lessons young Africans can learn from Traoré? Traoré's rise and popularity are not simply the result of his age or military background. They reflect a broader shift in African societies, a demand for leaders who are bold, empathetic, and committed to true sovereignty and justice. For a generation that has grown up in the shadow of unfulfilled promises and persistent challenges, Traoré represents the possibility of change and the power of youth to shape their own destinies. Whether his legacy will endure remains to be seen, but for now, he stands as the kind of leader African youth want: young, decisive, and unafraid to chart a new course for the continent.
Ibrahim Traore is a symbol, and a symbol is part of the system. So what young people must realize that success is not an individual achievement. You achieve because you are part of a team. You achieve because you are part of a chain, and a chain has many components. You achieve because you are focused. You achieve because you are courageous. You achieve because you love your country and you are selfless. You achieve because you don't have insatiable appetite for good things. You achieve because you are able to identify friends. You achieve because you have conquered yourself and you want to serve. Those are the positive lessons that young people must draw: discipline, courage, focus. Africa stands at crossroads, and when you are at crossroads, you choose which path you are going to follow. What is happening in Burkina Faso, and by extension in the Sahelian region to include Niger and Mali, is a good thing. A good thing because it is being demonstrated that young Africans can rise above the parapet of mediocrity and begin to shine light in the right direction.